I believe most of us would agree that the Kurgan from Highlander is one of the best cinematic villains ever. Although once a human, this child in him was killed by his circumstances and one or two evil guardians. What remained of him in the end was an immortal who fought other immortals for their quickening, which basically means their powers, skills, etc., with the end goal of winning the ultimate reward, conveniently called the prize. But the Kurgan is just one of the awesome Highlander villains from the TV show and movies. And in this video, I'm going to explore the 7 most iconic of them. The Kurgan. The Kurgan was an immortal and a contender for the prize, and across roughly 3,000 years, he made that everyone else's problem. He killed and plundered, and he took the heads of many immortals until Connor MacLeod finally took his head in 1985, in the final battle for the prize. The Kurgan was born as Vitor near the Caspian Sea in the land that would later be called Russia. A powerful flood swept him away from his family, and he woke up later among a tribe of Kurgan people. Grigg and his wife Ura took him in, although Grigg worked the boy brutally and refused to accept him, while Ura protested his treatment. Grigg later threw Vitor into a pit with a starved dog, but he survived by killing the dog, which is probably when the Kurgan's mind became what it became. In 970 BC, Grigg smashed Vitor's head with a rock. After he woke, he put a searing hot stone in Grigg's mouth as he slept, killing him, and then told Ura that a bear killed him. At 12, Vitor left and joined bandits who preyed on caravans that crossed the steppes between India and the Mediterranean. As a young man, he suffered the first of many deaths and became an immortal. Later he met another immortal known as the Bedouin, who explained his true nature and taught him the ways of the game. Bedouin became his master and his only friend, and then the Kurgan took his mentor's head, claimed the scimitar, and inherited the Bedouin's gift for visions. That was the point where he began to see visions of a Scotsman who would one day kill him. In 615 BC, after he took another immortal's head, he met Kronos, Silas, and Caspian, the horsemen of the apocalypse. They offered him the vacant place as the new 4th horseman after their former 4th deserted. He refused, challenged them, and expected a one-on-one duel, yet all 3 attacked at once and defeated him. Kronos lodged a sword in his chest, and they left him alive because they said he was too pathetic to kill. The defeat strengthened his determination to find a better blade and become a better warrior. In 479 BC, he allied with the Persians as part of a special unit and fought at the Battle of Plataea in Greece. He faced an immortal Spartan warrior who wielded a one-of-a-kind katana made by Masamune, and the blade shattered the Kurgan's weapon. He escaped by going over a cliff, and from that experience, he learned the value of steel and a well-crafted blade. Later, he learned that the Spartan's name was Tok'ne, and if you're really a fan of the franchise, you'd know that Tok'ne was none other than Ramirez. In 1275, he encountered Tok'ne again in the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, and by then, Tok'ne used the name Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez. The Kurgan asked about the mysterious Scotsman. Ramirez denied it, and Ramirez ended the fight by jumping into a nearby body of water. From 1453 to 1535, the Kurgan stayed in Moscow. 6 years later, in 1542, he traced Connor to Glencoe, broke into Connor's home, and found Ramirez there. The Kurgan charged and raised his sword for a savage overhead strike, and Ramirez countered with a cut that sliced the Kurgan's throat wide open, which left him scarred and permanently damaged his voice. The fight wrecked the home. The Kurgan cornered Ramirez, forced him up broken stairs, stabbed him in the back, asked for final words, took spit in the face, and then took Ramirez's head and quickening. Heather witnessed the quickening, and as a final act of spite, the Kurgan killed her. He remained in the Scottish Highlands until 1610, before traveling to more parts of the world. But in 1985, under the alias Victor Kruger, the Kurgan went to New Jersey to track Osta Vasilek, who came face-to-face with Connor, whom he fought. Now, I really don't want to repeat the events of the movie and the fight between Connor and the Kurgan, but yeah, we know that the bad guy lost his head, and Connor took the Kurgan's quickening, and then the Kurgan's spirit appeared in Connor's mind. As a person, the Kurgan was a cruel megalomaniac who treated everything as something to use or destroy, and he loved immortality rather than fearing it. He respected holy ground rules, yet still desecrated such places without a second thought. And of course, he ignored secrecy, attacked immortals, and their immortal friends. His fighting style was more about strength, stalking, and sudden attacks, although his sword work showed he could fight with more grace. And yeah, he used various weapons over time, ranging from a cutlass early on, a black-roped katana at Plataea that Ramirez shattered, to a custom disassembled two-handed broadsword. Kronos, or whatever name he felt like using that century, is definitely one of the most interesting bad guys for me after the Kurgan. His real name was Kronos, but across history, he passed as Melvin Korin, Eugene Korinsky, Dexter Corvin, and probably a dozen more identities that we don't really even know about. Now, he first appeared in Highlander the series and served as a warrior, thief, murderer, and at one point, even a virologist. So yeah, the man was like a jack of many trades and did not like small ambitions. He took on the symbolic role of Pestilence as one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and his powers complemented this role of his. He was obviously immortal, highly skilled with a sword, competent in combat overall, immune to terrestrial diseases, and even biological or chemical warfare, and rather unfairly, immune to Cassandra's hypnotic voice, which had the potential to control others with little to no effort. His goals were mostly about bringing the apocalypse itself, which thankfully failed. In the Bronze Age, he led the Four Horsemen alongside Methos, Silas, and Caspian, and together they roamed 2 continents, killing, pillaging, and destroying settlements for power and pleasure rather than survival. At some unknown point, Methos abandoned that life, and with his departure, the Horsemen disbanded. Kronos assumed Silas and Caspian had died, although that wasn't quite true. According to one deleted scene, it seemed that Methos trapped Kronos in a tomb for centuries, and once free, Kronos moved through aliases while attempting to rebuild a destructive circle that matched the thrill of the original Horsemen, yet none satisfied him. Watchers sent to observe him rarely survived, and eventually he vanished from their knowledge entirely, leading them to misjudge his age as roughly 1,500 years, when he was in fact almost as old as Methos himself. That age also explained why ancient tricks, such as Cassandra's controlling voice, held no power over him. In 1867, he surfaced in the American West as Melvin Korin, leading a gang called the Comancheros in Agua Dulce, Texas. Duncan MacLeod, trained by the Sioux as a scout, joined the Texas Rangers and hunted the group down, cornering Korin in a burning barn. A ranger's bullet blocked Korin's escape, and MacLeod tried to take his head before revival but lost the chance, which I'm sure felt to MacLeod like letting a storm pass without boarding the windows. By November 1996, he reappeared with a desire to exact vengeance from Methos for abandonment, but due to some exceptional circumstances, the Four Horsemen reunited and devised a plan to bring about their long-awaited dream of an apocalypse. They wanted to use a biological weapon, which could have easily killed thousands, possibly millions. This revelation also exposed Methos' past as Death himself, which understandably shook MacLeod, while Cassandra insisted all 4 deserved death. The pursuit led to Bordeaux, where Caspian fell in battle. Cassandra was captured, and eventually an abandoned submarine base became the stage for the final confrontation. MacLeod defeated Kronos after a brutal fight. Methos beheaded Silas despite their bond, and Cassandra nearly killed Methos before MacLeod persuaded her otherwise. Kronos' influence lingered even after death, since the demon Ahriman later used his likeness and voice to torment MacLeod, all of which ultimately led to illusions that led Duncan to kill Richie Ryan by mistake and spend over a year recovering before banishing the demon for another millennium. In the series finale, an alternate reality without MacLeod revealed a looming war between Horton and a Kronos allied with Methos, a conflict implied to consume the world. And strangely, seeing that disaster helped MacLeod understand his own worth. Kronos himself came across as brutal yet calculating, and as someone who commanded fear more through his mere existence. Needless to say, he was a fighter who relied on experience and intimidation rather than speed, and possessed a mind that preferred large-scale devastation over personal duels, which made him less a mere villain and more a walking era of violence, albeit one that was immortal. Jacob Kell. Jacob Kell from Highlander Endgame, the 2000 movie, is the main villain, the prime contender for the prize that all immortals are after, and a warrior whose hunger for power goes beyond every code that once kept their world from tearing itself apart. You see, he had once been a clansman alongside Connor MacLeod, and that shared past makes their conflict far more personal, at least when compared to a routine duel for survival between two immortals. And this is so mostly because Kell is not some stranger with a sword. He is the childhood friend who grew into Connor's most relentless enemy, the man who pushed him toward the ultimate sacrifice. He's also a major enemy to Duncan MacLeod, Connor's own kinsman, and strangely enough, he becomes the mentor and would-be romantic figure in the life of Duncan's former wife, Kate Faith Devaney. So yeah, lots of complexities, to put it mildly. Played by Bruce Payne, his story begins in Glenfinnan, where he grew up with Connor as a close friend, long before swords and beheadings entered the picture. He was a latent immortal, which basically means that he was unaware of what lay ahead, and he had been adopted by a priest named Father Rainey, so you know the kind of belief system he developed. Everything changed, however, when Connor awakened as a full immortal after his death in battle against Clan Fraser, and the fear surrounding him put his mother Kaelin in danger. Connor rode back to Glenfinnan in hopes of saving her, only to be imprisoned, while Kell, ignoring desperate pleas, planned to burn Kaelin that same night. The fire spread across the settlement, people rushed in panic, and Connor reached his mother too late. In a moment full of grief and anger, he killed Father Rainey when the priest tried to console him, and Kell attacked Connor too, only to fall upon Connor's blade and die. The twist, of course, is that Kell was revived as an immortal, and from that instant onward, vengeance became his sole purpose. Once immortal, Jacob Kell devoted his entire existence to hunting Connor, and he didn't respect the traditional rules that governed immortal combat. Instead, he gathered a private circle of 6 immortals, including the likes of Kate Faith Devaney, Jin Kay, Robert Crackerbob Cassidy, Winston Urhuero, Manny Rita, and Carlos Dash, and they ambushed targets together so Kell could take their heads with ease. Watcher Records later described him as one of the most powerful immortals alive by the time of the Gathering, with more than 600 kills, and he even implied responsibility for Brenda Wyatt's death along with everyone whose loss had wounded Connor. He lured Connor back to New York by targeting Rachel Ellenstein, Connor's foster daughter, and detonated explosives at Connor's antique shop, killing her and pushing Connor into a despair that forced him into a Watcher sanctuary. A decade passed before Kell found him again, and once inside the sanctuary, he slaughtered every immortal there. But he left behind a decapitated body, so Watchers would assume Connor had fallen. Duncan refused to believe it, and searched until he finally met Connor again, only to discover Kell and Kate right behind him. Neither MacLeod possessed enough strength alone, so Connor ordered Duncan to take his head, merging their power in a heartbreaking decision that forced Duncan to kill his own mentor and brother figure. The final confrontation followed, and Kell, rather than finish Duncan quickly, chose torment and even killed his own followers except Faith to deepen the psychological wound. During the last duel, Duncan fell to his knees, yet Connor's spirit and wisdom took control of his body. Kell panicked at the sight, and Duncan beheaded him. As Kell's quickening transferred, he screamed, "Never over," before Connor's spirit departed with him into the unknown, bringing an end to a feud that had gone on and defined several centuries. Kane. Kane's origins can be traced back to as far as 987 AD in Samarkand, Outer Mongolia, and from the beginning of his life, he was into violence rather than virtue. His childhood hero was the Kurgan, and Kane adopted his tactics and ferocity as personal doctrine. which in turn, and quite expectedly, propelled him into a life of conquest that ended up in the devastation of regions across Mongolia and Uzbekistan. In 1023, during one of his campaigns across Asia, he suffered his first death due to disease, and that was the beginning of his true path as an immortal. Upon awakening, he encountered his first teacher, a shaman named Samga, who explained the nature of immortality and the principles of the game. Yet Kane repaid that guidance by taking her head, as did the Kurgan once upon a time. There's also the possibility that he trained under another immortal named Uv Bakar, and at some point he attempted to take Bakar's head and quickening as well. That attempt failed, and his teacher exiled him, although exile never truly stops a man who views the world as territory waiting to be claimed. He soon returned to his former career as a warlord and recruited two fellow immortals, Sengi Khan and Kabul Khan, who became his lieutenants and partners in destruction. By the 13th century, Kane had traveled from the Middle East back into Central Asia and rode alongside Genghis Khan as a general around the year 1220. Interestingly, the Kurgan also offered his services to Genghis Khan during that period, and when Kane encountered the very man he had admired since childhood, the two immortals developed a surprising mutual respect rather than enmity, which was usually the case with these two men. In 1226, Kane rose to the position of leading general when the Kurgan chose to return fully to the game, leaving command to him before the assault on the Tangut tribe. Kane accepted that honor, but eventually he quit the Khan's service as well, once again chasing personal power rather than shared conquest. Sengi Khan and Kabul Khan continued at his side as immortal marauders, and together they terrorized the known world while their strength grew with every passing victory. Around the year 1400, Kane sought a different form of power and studied under the immortal sorcerer Nakano in Japan. But as could be expected, Kane saw knowledge as a weapon rather than wisdom. He betrayed Nakano and attempted to take his head in order to gain magical abilities and powers of illusion. But Nakano defeated him and forced him to retreat, though Kane promised revenge. That promise came due in 1605 during what became known as the disaster at Neri. Kane and his henchmen tracked Connor MacLeod to Mount Neri, Nakano's shrine, and there they confronted both the Highlander and the sorcerer. Connor suffered injuries, Nakano lost his head, and Kane gained Nakano's quickening along with powers of illusion. But that victory had an unexpected consequence. You see, the surge of energy brought down the entire mountain, and while Connor narrowly escaped, Kane and his followers remained trapped beneath the collapse for the next 400 years. 4 centuries later, an archaeological expedition unknowingly released them from beneath the ruins, and Kane re-established his dominance. He killed a security guard, sent Kabul Khan to New York City in pursuit of Connor, and later took Sengi Khan's head and quickening, thereby consolidating power within himself. After Connor defeated Kabul, Kane teleported to New York, kidnapped Connor's adopted son John MacLeod, and threatened Alex Johnson to draw the Highlander into a final confrontation at an industrial plant. During the battle, Kane employed several illusion techniques that distorted perception and reality itself. Yet Connor ultimately succeeded in beheading Kane and ending a reign of terror that had stretched from medieval battlefields to modern city streets.
Maybe.
General Katana. Played by Michael Ironside, this guy was an overarching enemy and was connected to the events in the original Highlander film and was the main villain in Highlander 2. In August 1994, news reports revealed that Earth's ozone layer was vanishing, and within months, unfiltered sunlight takes millions of lives across Africa. Among the victims is Connor's wife, Brenda Wyatt MacLeod, and before she dies, she makes him promise that he'll fix the problem. By 1999, Connor oversaw a scientific effort led by Dr. Alan Neyman to create an electromagnetic shield around the planet, an artificial barrier that mimics the ozone layer and protects humanity from solar radiation. The plan works, and both men believe history will remember them for 1,000 years. The victory, however, did not come bereft of unforeseen consequences. The shield plunges the world into constant night, raises global temperatures, increases humidity, and by 2024, humanity begins to decline under endless darkness. Control of the Shield falls into the hands of the Shield Corporation, but the organization's chief executive, David Blake, is more about building himself a business model than bothering himself with billions of human lives. So he imposes fees for its operation. Resistance grows, and soon terrorist groups pop up like mushrooms in a rainforest, including with Louise Marcus, a former employee who wants the Shield dismantled. At this point, Connor has aged into a frail old man who expects to die naturally, and during a performance of Wagner's Götterdämmerung, he sees a vision of Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez that unlocks a lot of memories, the long-forgotten kind. Those memories reveal that the origin of their struggle is actually from a distant world called Zeist, where there was once a rebellion against General Katana's rule. Ramirez selected MacLeod as a man of great destiny to confront the tyrant, but Katana crushed the uprising and captured both men. The priests of Zeist then sentenced them to exile on Earth in pursuit of the prize, a reward that allowed the victor to either grow old and die on Earth or return to Zeist. Back in 2024, Louise Marcus uncovers proof that Earth's ozone layer has healed naturally, meaning the shield is unnecessary. But the corporation hides the truth to preserve profit. Meanwhile, Katana decides MacLeod must never return to Zeist and sends two immortal henchmen, Corda and Reno, to kill him. Marcus reaches Connor first and seeks his help, only to find a weary man who disapproves of terrorism and believes his time is nearly over. Their conversation ends abruptly when the henchmen attack. Connor decapitates both, absorbs their energy through the quickening, regains his youth, and unintentionally summons Ramirez back to life. Ramirez awakens in Glencoe on a theatrical stage during a performance of Hamlet, adapts quickly, and later reunites with Connor and Louise. Katana arrives in New York as well, causing destruction, and eventually meets MacLeod in a church where the sacred ground prevents combat, though Connor openly resents his renewed immortality. Soon, Ramirez joins Connor and Louise in their plan to dismantle the shield, while Katana forms an uneasy alliance with David Blake, who warns that shutting the barrier down could destroy the planet. The conflict escalates and leads to the deaths of Dr. Alan Neyman, Ramirez, Blake, and finally Katana himself. Connor uses the combined energy of his last quickening, gained from Katana, to disable the shield safely. Connor then claims the prize and returns to Zeist with Louise, where he closes a cycle that began with exile and ends with liberation. The Guardian of the Source. In Highlander the Source, the Guardian was the final major enemy Duncan MacLeod must face. He is an ancient immortal, nearly 15,000 years old. Long before Duncan ever met the Guardian, the latter searched for the mysterious source of immortality around 7988 BC alongside other immortals. Played by Christian Solimeno, very little is known about his life before the title, except that he had been a world-renowned assassin who presumably died violently and awakened as an immortal. After gaining immortality, he joined a group of fellow immortals who pursued the Source, a mythical wellspring that appeared once every few thousand years and promised answers none of them fully understood. During the journey, the group slowly turned against one another, partly because the Source temporarily stripped nearby immortals of their powers and left them vulnerable, and in the end, only 3 reached the destination. More precisely, the future Guardian, another male immortal, and a female companion. They encountered the existing Guardian and fought him, unaware that the true test was not to kill, but to immobilize and spare him. They failed that test, beheaded him, and the consequences were immediate. The one who struck the final blow became the new Guardian. The other male emerged grotesquely deformed, and the female was absorbed into the Source itself, only to be reincarnated thousands of years later as Anna Tashemka, a non-immortal woman whose connection to Duncan would later become painfully significant. As the Source neared another manifestation, the Guardian began hunting those who might seek it, not out of ambition, but desperation, because passing the test would only trap another soul into the same endless duty and prolong his own torment. He killed Zhai Jie, an immortal archaeologist, and then turned his attention toward Duncan Duncan MacLeod, whom he saw as his potential successor. Instead of confronting Duncan directly at first, he targeted those around him, starting with longtime ally Joe Dawson, then Reggie Weller, a computer expert who assisted Duncan's quest, and later Cardinal Giovanni, who had already lost his sanity and abandoned Duncan by then. He also abducted Anna, Duncan's former wife and the reincarnation of the woman absorbed by the Source centuries ago, and brought her to the manifestation site as bait. When Duncan finally reached the Source, the two fought each other. But more than a fight, this was a test of understanding each other. Duncan managed to immobilize the Guardian by tricking him into spinning at such speed that he drilled himself into the ground, and the Guardian, almost pleading beneath his taunts, requested MacLeod to decapitate him. Duncan refused, however, due to the loss of his friends and also because he sensed the trap behind the request. The Guardian then glowed with intense light, screamed that he was cursed forever, and appeared to explode, bound to the cycle until the next manifestation thousands of years away. You see, what makes the Guardian unusual is not only his abilities, but also his demeanor. Unlike other immortals, he is truly invulnerable except at the Source itself, capable of moving at incredible speed and wielding a sword with expert skill long before he gained his title. Ahriman. Ahriman in the Highlander television series was not really an immortal, he was something far older and far less tangible. He serves as the main antagonist at the end of Season 5 and continues into Season 6. And unlike most villains Duncan MacLeod faces, Ahriman is not a part of the game at all. He is a Zoroastrian demon who returns to Earth every 1,000 years with the singular purpose of spreading destruction and breaking the champion of good, the one warrior capable of stopping him. He was famously defeated in 997 AD at the hands of an immortal named Timothy of Gilliam. Centuries later, an archaeologist named Jason Landry warned Duncan MacLeod that he was the chosen champion meant to confront Ahriman's return. And although Duncan did not believe that at first, that changed when he began to see people he had personally killed walking around as if nothing had happened. Horton appeared, Kronos appeared, and suddenly the line between memory and reality blurred to the point where Duncan himself began to doubt his own sanity. Others around him assumed he was losing his mind, and the situation reached its most tragic moment when Duncan, convinced Richie Ryan was Ahriman in disguise, killed his own friend by mistake. Of course, this shattered him more than any duel ever could, and he retreated into a monastery, effectively vanishing from the Watcher's records for an entire year. Even Joe Dawson, who had tracked immortals across centuries, could not locate him during that period. 1 year later, Duncan returned to Paris and visited Richie's grave, where he finally encountered Ahriman directly, though the demon again hid behind the faces of Horton and Kronos. This meeting changed Duncan's resolve from doubt to determination, and he swore to destroy the entity no matter the cost. Guidance arrived from an unexpected direction through Sophie Baines, a mysterious woman who had already died, yet whose spirit provided the knowledge necessary to confront the demon. With the support of Joe Dawson and Father Beaufort, Duncan eventually managed to defeat Ahriman not through raw strength or superior swordsmanship, but through understanding the nature of the enemy itself. What makes Ahriman particularly dangerous is not physical invulnerability or combat skill, but a collection of supernatural abilities that target the mind rather than the body. He can shapeshift, communicate through telepathy, manipulate objects and perceptions with psychokinesis. And most effectively, he appears as people his victims have loved or lost. His true source of strength lies in hate and fear, which are emotions he feeds on. If a victim denies him those emotions, however, and refuses anger and terror, he loses power and can be banished or even destroyed. Originally, the storyline was intended to end with a cliffhanger set 20 years in the future, where Duncan would prepare for a final confrontation, yet production limits and scheduling conflicts condensed the arc into the opening episodes of Season 6 instead. So yeah, there's like zero dearth of bad guys in the Highlander franchise. From ruthless immortals to demons, there is something for everyone. However, what really makes the Highlander villains so good is the fact that despite being superpowered and all that, you can totally relate with them. And if you ask me, a relatable villain is the best kind of villain. I mean, take Thanos or Sauron or any of those big bads. They're great, sure, but you expect them to fail through their own undoing. But people hate Bellatrix Lestrange and Dolores Umbridge more than they hate Voldemort, making these women the worst antagonists. And the reason is simple. You're more likely to find someone like Lestrange and Umbridge around yourself than Voldemort. I'll leave you at that. Stay safe and have a good one.